small rocky world called Epsilon Verge, where humans had built a quiet colony far from the busy core of human space. The colony was not big, just a few domes, with farms, labs, and homes for about 800 people. Most worked as miners, scientists, or farmers. They lived simple lives, growing food, studying local plants, and sending reports back to Earth once every few months. One morning, the sky turned dark without warning. Huge black ships broke through the clouds. Their shapes looked like giant insects made of metal legs, sharp and curved. The ships belonged to the Zarethian Dominion, an old empire of bug-like beings who conquered worlds fast and without mercy. They saw soft-skinned mammals like humans as weak and easy to crush. Alarms screamed across the colony. People ran to shelters, but the Zarethians moved quicker than anyone expected. Drop pods fell like rain, cracking open to release soldiers, tall as 2 men, with hard shells and many arms. Each soldier carried long energy spears that hummed with blue light. The humans fought back with rifles and improvised bombs, but the fight did not last long. The Zarethians had better weapons and numbers on their side. Smoke filled the air. Domes cracked open. Fields burned in minutes. The colony fell. The Zarethians rounded up survivors and sorted them. Some they killed right away. Others they herded into big cargo holds for transport to their ships. One group of prisoners caught special attention, because the Zarethian commander wanted a clear message to send back to human worlds. He ordered his officers to pick one human who looked weak and harmless, to show everyone how easy humans break. They chose Dr. Ilara Voss. She was 34 years old, not very tall, with short dark hair and calm brown eyes. She worked as a xenobiologist, studying strange life forms on new planets. She wore a simple gray jumpsuit, covered in dust from the fight. Her hands were already bound with glowing cuffs that floated just above her skin. Her arms still. She did not struggle or shout when soldiers pulled her forward. She only looked around, taking in every detail of the aliens, their clicking mandibles, their shiny black armor, their strange smell like burnt oil and wet dirt. The Zarethians pushed her onto a transport shuttle with 10 other prisoners. They flew up to the biggest ship, called Hive Sovereign, a massive vessel shaped like a flattened egg, covered in spikes and glowing vents. Inside, the air felt thick and smelled sharp. The walls pulsed faintly like living skin. Lights came from thin slits that moved like eyes. Ilara sat on the cold floor and watched everything without speaking. The other prisoners whispered or cried, but she stayed quiet. Her face showed no fear, only steady focus. When they reached the main bridge, the commander stood waiting. He was bigger than the others, his shell marked with gold lines. His eyes glowed red. He looked down at the prisoners and pointed one claw at Ilara, said, in a voice that clicked and buzzed. The soldiers dragged her to the center of the bridge, where a bright light shone down. Everyone on the bridge turned to stare. Officers, workers, drones, all watching. The commander walked around her slowly, his claws clicking on the deck. He spoke through a translator box, so the words came out flat and mechanical. "Look at this soft thing," he said. "This is what humans call strong. A small female with no armor, no weapons, no claws. She will show the galaxy how easily humans fall." He raised one arm, and a holoscreen appeared, showing live feeds from the ruined colony. Humans running, burning buildings, dead bodies. The commander laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Then he turned back to Ilara. "Tell me, little mammal, do you fear death?" Ilara looked up at him. Her voice came out clear and even. "I fear many things, but not in the way you think," she answered. The commander tilted his head, surprised by the calm reply. He expected screams or begging. Instead, she met his gaze without blinking. He waved a claw, and 2 officers stepped forward. They pressed long needles against her neck, neural spikes, thin wires that pushed into skin to read thoughts. The spikes glowed as they worked, pulling memories to the surface. Images flashed on screens around the bridge. Elara as a child on Earth, playing in rain. Elara in a lab, holding glowing samples. Elara on Epsilon Verge, collecting soil with careful hands. The Zarethians watched and murmured, "She has knowledge of life forms," one officer said, "perhaps useful for study." Another clicked his mandibles. "She shows no combat training, no implants worth noting, just a researcher, nothing special." The commander nodded, satisfied. "Take her to the xenobiology cell," he ordered. "We will cut her open later, piece by piece. Broadcast the process to every human world. Let them see what happens when they resist." The soldiers pulled Elara away, down long corridors, past humming machines and rows of glowing tanks. She walked without fighting her. Steps steady. Her breathing. Even one guard noticed something odd. Her heart rate stayed almost flat. No spike, no panic. He reported it to his officer, but the officer waved it away. "Mammals pretend to be brave until the knife comes," they said. They locked her in a small round cell, the walls clear on all sides so guards could watch her every move. The air inside felt cold and dry. A thin mat on the floor, and a bowl of water. That was all she had. Elara sat down, crossed her legs and closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. She looked at the walls, studying the tiny vents, the faint glow of sensors, the way light bent around the edges. She noticed everything. Under her left collarbone, hidden deep in the skin, rested a small implant, no bigger than a grain of rice. The Zarethian scanners had seen it, but dismissed it as old scar tissue or useless medical junk. They did not know what it really was. The implant came from a secret Earth program built for exactly this kind of moment. Human might face capture, alone. It waited, silent, patient, ready to wake when the time came right. Elara touched the spot lightly, with 2 fingers, feeling the faint warmth there. She allowed herself one small smile, so slight no guard noticed it. Then she leaned back against the wall and waited. The ship around her thrummed with life. Orders barked in alien tongues. Engines pushed the fleet toward the next target. Another human outpost, waiting to fall. The Zarethians felt sure of victory. They had taken worlds before this one. Human prisoner meant nothing to them, just proof of how weak her kind truly was. They had no idea she carried something far more dangerous than any gun or bomb inside her quiet body. The weapon waited, patient, calm, ready to spread when the moment arrived. Elara Vos sat in her cell, breathing slow and steady, each breath carrying the first invisible seeds of what would come. She did not need to fight with fists or shout for help. She only needed time and closeness. Zarethians had given her both, without knowing what they invited into their home. The Hive Sovereign flew on through the black, carrying its new captive deeper into Zarethian space. The commander returned to his throne, pleased with the day. His officers prepared messages of triumph. None of them looked back at the small cell, where one human sat alone, watching, waiting, counting the hours, until everything changed forever. Days passed inside the cold, clear cell on the Hive Sovereign. Elara Vos sat most of the time with her back against the smooth wall. She kept her legs crossed, and her hands resting lightly on her knees. The guards outside watched her through the transparent barrier. Sometimes 1 or 2 would stand close, tapping their claws against the wall to see if she jumped. She never did. Her face stayed calm, her breathing slow and even. The Zarethians liked to think they understood other species. They believed mammals felt fear in loud ways, screams, tears, shaking bodies. When nothing happened, they grew bored and walked away. Elara used that time well. She listened to every sound the ship made, the low hum of engines, the sharp clicks of claws on deck plates, the soft hiss of air moving through vents. She watched how the lights dimmed and brightened in patterns. She counted the shifts of the guards, how long each one stayed, how often they changed. She learned their habits without them knowing. Sometimes, officers came to question her. They stood outside the cell and spoke through the translator box, their voices flat and hard. They asked about human weapons, about colony defenses, about Earth fleets. Ilara answered in short, simple sentences. She told them what any public record already said. Humans build ships with strong hulls. They use missiles and lasers. They fight in groups. She gave no secrets, no troop numbers, no weak points. The officers wrote notes on glowing pads and left, looking satisfied. They thought she feared pain, and so she spoke truth to avoid it. They did not see how carefully she chose every word. One officer, named Kresk, came more often than the others. He was a science cast, with thinner arms and larger eyes. He carried tools that beeped and glowed. He liked to scan her body again and again. Each time the beams passed over her skin, she felt a faint warmth, but she kept still. Kresk spoke to her sometimes, not as a prisoner, but as something curious, about human feelings, why mammals waste energy on things like love, or anger, or sadness. Ilara thought for a moment, then answered, "Because those things help us survive longer than you think." Kresk clicked his mandibles, in what might have been laughter. He said, "Your kind is inefficient, soft, weak. Your hearts beat too fast. Your lungs take too much air. You break easily." She looked at him and said, "Maybe we bend instead of break." Kresk stopped laughing after that. They gave her food and water every day. A tray slid through a small slot in the wall, clear nutrient paste that tasted like nothing, and a cup of recycled water. Ilara ate slowly. She chewed each bite many times. She drank in small sips. She noticed how the paste made her feel slightly warm inside. She used that warmth. She controlled her body in small ways, slowing her pulse when guards watched, raising it slightly when she wanted them to think she felt stress. They scanned her often and saw changes, but they called them normal mammal responses. They did not look deeper. At night when the ship lights dimmed, Ilara lay on the thin mat and closed her eyes. She did not sleep fully. She drifted in a light rest. Her mind stayed awake. She felt the small implant under her collarbone. It stayed quiet, but not dead. It waited for the right signs. Alien pheromones in high amounts, close contact with many Zerethians, long hours in their air. She knew the plan from her training back on Earth. The implant would read the biochemistry around her. It would match patterns. It would wake when ready. Until then, it slept. She helped it by staying calm, by breathing steady, by staying close to her captors without fighting. Guards talked near her cell. Sometimes they did not think she understood their language, but she had studied basic Zerethian clicks and buzzes during her years as a xenobiologist. She caught pieces of their words. They spoke about the next target, a human mining station called Theta 9. They said it would fall in days. The fleet moved fast. No one could stop them. One guard laughed and said, "This soft prisoner will watch her kind die on the screens before we open her chest." She heard that and kept her face blank. Inside she counted more carefully. Kresk brought a new tool one day, a small device that floated in front of her face. It sent tiny puffs of air toward her nose. The air carried Zerethian pheromones, strong ones, used to control lower castes. Ilara breathed them in slowly. She felt nothing bad. The implant registered the chemicals. It stored samples. It adjusted itself in tiny steps. She thanked Kresk for the test. He looked surprised. "You thank me?" he asked. She nodded. "It helps me understand you better." He stared at her for a long time, then left without another word. The ship shook once during a jump through fold space. Ilara felt the pull in her bones. She used the moment to stretch her body in small, careful ways. She rolled her shoulders. She flexed her fingers inside the cuffs. She kept her movements so slow. No sensor flagged them as escape attempts. The guards outside shifted and clicked their shells against the wall. One of them said, "This one never moves much. Maybe already broken." Another answered, "Wait until the knife." She heard and smiled inside. She started small tests of her own. She changed her breathing pattern, just a little deeper inhales, longer exhales. She timed them to match the air cycle in the vents. She let her body heat rise and fall in tiny waves. The implant liked that. It grew warmer under her skin. Still hidden, still patient. She spoke to the guards, sometimes short questions about their homeworld, about their young, about their food. They answered because it amused them to mock her curiosity. One guard said, "Our larvae eat the weak among us. Your kind would not last a day in our nests." Alara nodded and said, "Perhaps that is why you fear us so much." The guard clicked angrily and walked away. Time moved slow in the cell, but Alara did not feel trapped. She turned the cell into her own lab. She studied the Zerethians, the way they moved, the way they smelled, the way their eyes caught light. She learned their weaknesses without tools, without weapons, just eyes and ears and patience. The implant kept its silent count. It measured exposure levels. It waited for the moment when enough pheromones saturated the air, when enough bodies stayed close, when the ship became one big breathing hive. One evening, Kresk came again. He stood closer than before. He pressed a panel, and the cell wall shimmered, allowing sound through more clearly. He asked, "Why do you not beg for freedom? Why do you sit so still?" Alara looked at him and said, "Because I am exactly where I need to be." Kresk tilted his head. His eyes narrowed. He said, "You speak like a riddle, mammal." "Perhaps we will solve you soon," she answered. "Perhaps you already have, and you do not know it yet." Kresk stared, then turned and left. The wall shimmered back to solid. Alara sat back and closed her eyes for a moment. Pulse, once very faint, very quick, the first sign the awakening had started. Soon the air she breathed out would carry something new, something small, something deadly to them. She kept her face calm. She kept her body still. She waited like a seed in dark soil, knowing the right moment would come, and when it did, nothing in the galaxy would stop what grew from her quiet patience. The hive sovereign flew on, carrying its prize deeper into enemy space. None of them saw the change coming. None of them understood that the small human in the cell had already begun to turn their strength into weakness, one calm breath at a time. On the seventh day, the air inside the hive sovereign felt heavier than before. Alara Voss sat in her cell as always, legs crossed, hands resting on her knees. She breathed slow and deep, each breath steady, like a machine set to a quiet rhythm. The guards outside had grown used to her stillness. They no longer tapped the wall to test her. They simply watched from time to time, then moved on to other duties. The ship hummed around her, engines pushing it toward the next human target. The crew focused on victory plans and weapon checks. No one paid much mind to the small prisoner anymore. Then the first alarm sounded, soft at first, like a distant buzz. It came from the medical deck near her cell, a single tone that grew louder and sharper. Lights on the walls flashed red in quick pulses. Guards near her cell turned their heads, mandibles clicking in confusion. One of them pressed a panel on the wall. A screen appeared, showing vital scans from the xenobiology section. The screen showed Alara's body. The colors had changed. Her blood markers glowed in strange patterns. Her hormone levels spiked in ways the system flagged as impossible for a mammal. Kresk, the science officer, arrived first. He ran down the corridor, his thinner legs moving fast. He stopped in front of her cell and stared through the clear wall. His large eyes narrowed. He spoke into his comm. "What is this anomaly?" The voice from the other end clicked back. "Unknown contamination. Her chemistry shifts without external cause." Kresk looked at Alara. She met his gaze without blinking. He said, "What have you done, mammal?" She answered, "Nothing you have not already allowed." Kresk hissed and ordered a full lockdown of the cell block. Doors sealed, vents closed, guards doubled. It came too late. The change had already started. The implant under her collarbone had woken fully. Days of close exposure to Zerethian pheromones had given it everything it needed. The tiny device had analyzed their biology, matched patterns, found weak points then. It released the first wave, strain V19, a virus made only for them, harmless to humans, designed years ago, in secret labs on Earth, as a last defense for captured agents. It traveled on her breath. Every calm exhale carried millions of particles so small, no eye could see them. The air in her cell grew thick with them. Then the ventilation pulled those particles out, spreading them through ducts, pipes, corridors. The first to feel it were the two guards standing closest to her cell. One clutched his thorax. Suddenly his mandibles snapped open and shut without control. His legs buckled. He fell against the wall, making a loud clatter. The other guard turned to help, but his own arms jerked strange. His compound eyes clouded over like fog on glass. He tried to speak, but only a wet rasp came out. Both collapsed, twitching on the deck plates, their shells scraping as bodies convulsed. Alarms now screamed across the ship. Red lights pulsed everywhere. Klaxons wailed in sharp bursts. Deck felt the first signs at once. A itch in their spiracles, a buzz in their heads. Pheromones that should guide them turned to noise inside their minds. Officers on lower levels dropped tools. Workers froze mid-task. Soldiers in the armory gripped weapons that shook in their claws. The virus moved fast. It attacked the neural ganglia, the centers that controlled movement and hive signals. Without those signals, the Zarethians lost coordination. They could still think, still feel terror, but their bodies betrayed them. Elara stood up slowly. She walked to the clear wall and placed one hand against it. She watched the chaos spread. The guards outside her cell lay still now, legs curled, mandibles open in silent screams. Other Zarethians ran past in panic. Some tried to help fallen comrades, but their own limbs failed. They stumbled, crashed into walls, fell in heaps. The ship shook as systems glitched. Without proper crew input, engines stuttered, lights flickered, consoles sparked. Voice clear through the barrier. You wanted a specimen. Congratulations, you have one. The words carried no anger, no triumph, just calm fact. Kresk staggered toward her cell. He leaned on the wall for support, his eyes wild. He pressed the release panel. The cell door hissed open. He meant to drag her out, to demand answers, but his arm refused to obey. He slid down to the floor, mandibles clicking weakly. "Why?" he rasped. "Why us?" Elara stepped out over the fallen guards. She looked down at him. "Because you took one human and thought that was enough to break us all." She moved down the corridor, careful steps, avoiding twitching bodies. She found a discarded plasma cutter on the deck, small handheld tool meant for repairs. She picked it up, tested the trigger. A thin blue flame hissed out. Good enough, she thought. She kept walking deeper into the ship. The virus worked in stages. First disorientation, then loss of motor control, then full synaptic overload. The higher castes lasted longer, their minds sharper. Even they felt the fog closing in. She passed officers clawing at their own shells, trying to clear airways that no longer responded. In one hallway, a squad of soldiers tried to form a line. They raised spears, but arms shook. Spears fell, clattering. The squad leader roared orders, but his voice cracked into clicks. He fell to his knees. Elara walked past them. They could not stop her. Their eyes followed her with hate and fear. She did not look back. She headed toward the nearest comm station. She needed to send one message. The ship became a place of nightmare corridors filled with fallen bodies, air thick with the smell of burnt circuits and alien fear pheromones. The virus spread through every vent, every shared breath. The Hive Sovereign, once proud flagship of the Dominion, turned into a tomb, still flying blind through space. Elara reached a small auxiliary bridge, unused in normal times. She forced the door with the plasma cutter. Sparks flew, metal bent. She stepped inside, sealed the door. Behind her, consoles glowed here, still active. She sat in the chair, worked the controls with steady hands. She had studied Zarethian systems during her years as a xenobiologist, enough to know basic overrides. She pulled up the fleet network, saw the other ships in formation, Still unaware, she sent one short encrypted burst toward human space. Trojan Echo. Successful fleet compromised. Send cleanup. The message vanished into the void. She knew help would come, but not yet. She had more work here. She locked life support overrides, flooded certain sections with higher doses of the accelerant strain. The virus sped up in those areas. Screams echoed through speakers, then silence. She monitored failing systems, watched vital signs drop one by one. The commander himself still lived on the main bridge, barely. He rasped orders that no one could follow, his throne surrounded by dead officers. Elara patched into the bridge feed, saw him there. Huge shell cracked in places, gold lines dulled by. Strain. She opened a channel to him. Her face appeared on his screen. He looked up, eyes red and dim. "You," she hissed. "What is this plague?" Elara answered softly. "You wanted to show the galaxy human weakness. Instead, you showed them something else." The commander tried to rise, but his legs gave way. He collapsed across the throne, mandibles scraping metal. "You will pay," he gasped. "All your kind will pay." Elara shook her head. "We already paid enough when you came to our worlds. Now you pay the price of underestimating one quiet prisoner." She cut the feed, sat back in the chair, watched the ship die around her. The engines coughed once, then steadied on automatic. The Hive Sovereign drifted, now a ghost vessel carrying death through the black. Elara breathed slow and even. The virus no longer needed her help. It had done its work. She waited, calm, patient, ready for whatever came next. The galaxy would soon learn what happened when aliens took one human captive and never asked if that one carried the end of their empire inside her quiet body. Chaos swallowed the Hive Sovereign completely after the virus broke free. Elara Voss moved through the corridors like a shadow among the fallen, her steps quiet and sure. The plasma cutter hung loose in her right hand, the comms tablet taken from a dead officer clipped to her belt. She wore no expression of joy or anger, only focused calm. The air smelled sharp now, mixed with the bitter scent of Zarethian fear, chemicals, and overheating metal. Everywhere she looked, bodies lay twisted, soldiers with spears still clutched in frozen claws. Workers curled into balls, officers sprawled across control panels. The virus did not kill most of them quickly. It left them aware, trapped inside failing bodies, minds screaming while limbs refused to obey. Some twitched still, mandibles opening and closing in weak clicks, eyes following her as she passed. She did not stop to look at them. She had work to do. She reached the main engineering deck. Doors sealed tight, but the security system had cascaded into. Failure locks flickered open and shut at random. She used the plasma cutter to slice through a side panel. Sparks flew, hot blue. She pulled wires, rerouted power. The door groaned and slid halfway open, enough for her to slip through. Inside the huge chamber, engines thrummed low. Emergency lights cast long shadows. Massive coils glowed faintly. Coolant pipes hissed steam. She found a maintenance terminal still active. She plugged in the comms tablet, downloaded basic schematics. She needed to know where the life support hub sat, how air moved through the ship. She worked fast, fingers steady on the controls. She isolated sections, flooded them with higher concentrations of the accelerant. The virus loved dense air. It spread faster there. She watched on the small screen as vital signs flatlined in those zones. One after another. She felt nothing, cold inside. The same cold she had carried since the colony fell. She remembered faces of friends burning in the domes, children crying as drop pods rained down. She pushed the memories down, kept moving. Alarms wailed non-stop. Now red strobes painted the walls in bloody flashes. The ship lurched once, engines misfiring. Without proper crew, the automatic systems fought to keep it stable. But they lost ground. Elara left engineering, headed upward toward the auxiliary command deck. She passed a group of lower caste drones, They had turned on each other in blind panic. Shells cracked open, green blood pooling on the deck. She stepped around the mess, careful not to slip. In one wide hallway, she found Kresk, the science officer. He still lived, propped against a bulkhead. His thinner arms trembled, his large eyes dim but focused. He saw her coming, tried to raise a claw, but it fell back, useless. He rasped words through a failing translator. "You did this, mammal. You poisoned us all." Alara stopped, looked down at him. She spoke softly. "I gave you nothing you did not take yourself. You scanned me, you breathed my air, you kept me close, you wanted knowledge, now you have." Kresk clicked weakly. "We were superior. We ruled worlds." "Your kind hides behind tricks," she answered. "We survive. That is no trick. That is nature. You forgot to ask if the prey carried teeth." She walked on, left him there, his body shaking, slower now. She reached the auxiliary bridge, forced the door again with the cutter. Inside the room felt quieter. Consoles glowed soft blue. No bodies here yet. She sat in the central chair, pulled up ship-wide feeds. Cameras showed the horror. Decks full of motionless forms, some still crawling. A few higher officers clung to life on the main bridge, clawing at controls, trying to send distress calls. None got through. She had locked the outgoing channels earlier. She opened internal speakers. Her voice carried through every corridor, calm and clear. "Attention all remaining crew. Your hive mind fails. Your bodies fail. Your empire fails. One human stands among you now." She paused, let the words sink in, then continued. "You took me to show weakness. Instead, you invited the end of your fleet. Feel it in your nerves, in your spiracles, in your young waiting back home. This is what happens when you underestimate one quiet captive." She cut the feed. Silence fell heavier than before. She monitored systems. The engines dropped to half power. Navigation drifted. The ship no longer followed its course. It tumbled slowly through the black, toward empty space. She sent another short burst. Same encrypted line. Trojan Echo, Phase 2 containment holding request, immediate intercept. She knew human ships would come fast now. Word had spread through relay buoys. The Dominion fleet would face questions soon. Questions with no answers. Hours passed. The virus reached its peak. Most Zorethians lay still now, breaths shallow or gone. The few survivors huddled in sealed rooms. But air circulated everywhere. No room stayed clean forever. Ilara stayed in the auxiliary bridge. She ate nutrient bars from emergency lockers, drank from a sealed pouch she found. She rested in short bursts, never fully asleep, always listening to the ship groan and sigh around her. At one point, she patched into the main bridge camera. The commander still lived, barely. He lay across his throne, gold lines on his shell, dull and cracked. His huge body heaved with effort. He saw the feed, knew she watched. He forced words through ruined mouthparts. "Mammal, you think this ends us? We have thousands of ships, billions of warriors. We will burn your worlds." Ilara answered from her chair. "You had thousands. Now you have fewer. Every hour you lose more. Your warriors turn to statues. Your ships drift empty. You will burn nothing." The commander tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet gurgle. He slumped forward, head hitting the console. Sparks flew from cracked panels. Ilara watched him go still. His red eyes dimmed. At last, she felt no hate, only quiet satisfaction. The job was almost done. She stood up, stretched her body sore from days of tension. She walked to a viewport, looked out at the stars, cold and silent, distant. The Hive Sovereign floated among them, a dead thing carried by momentum alone. She touched the glass, felt the faint vibration of dying systems. She spoke to herself, low enough that no recorder caught it. One human, enough to change everything. She returned to the chair, pulled up damage reports. Hull integrity failing in multiple sections, power dropping, life support redlining. Soon, the ship would become unlivable, even for her. She prepared for that. She sealed her suit from the emergency locker, checked oxygen levels. Good for days. She set automatic beacons, false ones to confuse any Zarethian rescue, false hope to draw them close, and then real ones, hidden, for human forces. The ship grew colder. Lights dimmed to emergency red. Consoles flickered slower. Alara sat alone in the quiet bridge, surrounded by screens showing empty halls, empty thrones, empty lives. She waited, patient as always. The virus had done its part. Now the galaxy would see the result. One small woman had turned the mightiest flagship into a warning, a drifting monument to the cost of pride. Outside, the stars watched indifferent. The Hive Sovereign tumbled on, carrying its cargo of death, and one living human, who had become more than a prisoner. She had become judgment itself. Calm, silent, unstoppable. The reckoning had begun, and it started with her steady breath in a cell that no longer held her. 40 hours later, human warships came out of fold space and surrounded the drifting Hive Sovereign. And their advanced scanners swept the massive vessel from bow to stern, and found all engines cold and all weapons offline, and only one single living signal aboard the entire ship. And the boarding teams departed their mother vessels in heavily armored shuttles, and cut entry points into the hull, with precision tools, and advanced carefully through the long dark corridors, stepping over the many fallen Zarethian bodies that lay twisted in their final agony, with mandibles open and eyes dim. And the air carried the lingering scent of the engineered virus, but the protective suits of the teams kept them completely safe from harm. And they followed the clear emergency beacon signal straight to the auxiliary bridge. And when they entered the room, they found Alara Voss sitting quietly in the central command chair, with her hands resting calmly in her lap, and her face showing no fear, only peace. The teams raised their rifles at first, ready for any threat, but she rose very slowly, and lifted her empty hands, palms open, and said, "I surrender. Take me home now." And the soldiers scanned her thoroughly for any concealed devices or dangers, and found nothing at all. And they escorted her with care through the corridors of death and back to the waiting shuttles, and then across to the safety of the main human flagship, where she was welcomed as a hero who had saved countless lives. On board the flagship, the medical staff performed complete and detailed scans of her whole body, and the results confirmed that the virus had run its course and self-terminated, leaving no trace whatsoever in her blood or tissues or organs. And the doctors provided her with fresh, clean clothing and hot, nourishing meals and a comfortable private room. And she slept soundly for many hours straight. And when she finally awoke, the fleet admirals and leading scientists gathered in the large, secure briefing room. They asked her to recount every detail, from the initial capture on the colony to the final moments on the ship. And Alara described it all in simple and basic words about the hidden implant from the Special Earth program, and the patient days spent in the cell observing and waiting, and the precise moment the device activated, based on the alien chemistry, and the way the strain spread silently through the ventilation, and the resulting chaos that consumed the crew, and the death of the commander on his throne, and the ship becoming a silent tomb, adrift in space. And the admirals and scientists listened in total silence, absorbing every word. And then one senior admiral leaned forward and asked her how exactly one human could defeat an entire flagship full of warriors. And she replied calmly, because they took one human captive and believed she was weak and harmless, and they never once asked if she was dangerous or what she might carry inside her body. Complete undoing. The story of the event spread rapidly through all human colonies and out to allied species, and even reached the ears of the Dominion itself. And everywhere the images and reports of the once invincible Hive Sovereign, now a powerless drifting wreck, filled with the bodies of its crew, played on every screen and news feed. And the Dominion suffered additional blows as 3 more of their capital ships fell silent in the following weeks, when the latent virus reached them through returning fleets, and the strain activated again, turning more warriors into helpless forms. And the great empire that had conquered so many worlds now withdrew its forces from all human border regions, and a deep fear spread through their hive structures for the first time in their long history. And humans chose not to celebrate with loud victories or parades, but instead quietly strengthened their defenses and expanded their scout fleets and formed new pacts with other races. And Alara Voss became a living legend known to every human and many beyond as the woman who transformed from a simple captive into the ultimate weapon, and the quiet xenobiologist who used nothing but time and breath to stop an invasion. After the intensive debriefings and all medical clearances, Alara made a simple request for reassignment to a small quiet research station located on a remote moon orbiting a distant gas giant, and the High Command granted it without delay. And on that station, she returned to the work she loved, with laboratories full of growing plants and soil samples and observation domes that offered clear views of the cosmos. And she lived a simple life there, with plain clothing and short hair, and very few words spoken to the occasional visitors. And one particular day, a team from the Central News Service arrived to ask if she would provide a short recorded statement for the permanent historical archives, and she agreed to do so, but kept her words brief and direct. Asked her why she chose not to warn the Zarethians or attempt to halt the virus once it began its work. And Ilara looked straight into the recording device with steady, calm eyes and said, "They assumed I was not dangerous. They never asked if I was." And that wrong assumption became their undoing. And humans have always understood that one of us can be sufficient to change the course of events. And sometimes we are the storm that arrives without noise. And sometimes we are the plague that begins with a single breath. And sometimes we are the final sight an enemy sees before their world shifts forever. And the entire galaxy took those words to heart, and the Dominion leaders in particular heard the message clearly. And as a result, their expansion halted, and their raiding parties ceased, and their communications toward human space now carried tones of caution rather than demands. As the years passed peacefully, Ilara continued her research in the lab, content with her data and her specimens. The implant had been safely removed and destroyed long before, and she spoke of the Hive Sovereign incident only when directly questioned. And she mentored young scientists who came to the moon to learn the values of patience and sharp observation, the very qualities that had allowed her to survive and triumph. And on especially clear evenings, she would sit alone inside the observation dome and gaze out at the vast field of stars, and remember the details of the cell, and the sound of the guard's claws, and the imposing figure of the commander, and the instant when the weapon within her awakened. And she would permit herself one small private smile, knowing the fundamental truth that a single human taken captive can bring down an entire empire, when that human possesses the hidden weapon of being constantly underestimated, and the weapon of endless patience, and the weapon of pure human determination. And the stars kept burning bright across the void, and the galaxy continued its endless turn, but now forever marked with greater respect and wariness toward the resilient species from Earth, because every empire and every race now understood the vital lesson: to take one human captive is to risk everything you have built. And to take one human is to possibly awaken a force capable of ending your reign. And to take one human is to learn far too late that we carry the weapon inside us all.